Yeah, it's Timothy Renner, and I am an author, an illustrator, and a paranormal explorer, I guess you could call it. Yeah, it was a very young age. I grew up in what I call like the golden age of Bigfoot. It was like 1970s when I was born, but by 1976, things like the Legend of Boggy Creek was out, and of course the Patterson Gimlin film, the very famous Bigfoot film, was filmed in the late 60s. So there was, Bigfoot on TV, and kind of Bigfoot hit pop culture around that time as well. So it was a great time to be into this stuff. I was completely fascinated by it. And then I was also into what I learned later would be called folklore. At the time, I didn't know what it was. It was just cool stuff I liked when I was a kid. So ghost stories and stuff. But if somebody would tell me a local ghost story and they said, it happened at this mill or wherever, I would always want to go there. And I didn't know that I was, I would be doing this as an adult later on. But when I was a kid, I absolutely loved it. Now, half the time couldn't get my parents to take me there, but, I wanted to go there. If I could get there on my bike, I'd get there. One of the earliest things I can remember is my mom waking me up when I was about 8 years old. I think I was about 8. I didn't write it down or anything. It was just, I think I was around 8 years old. She woke me up and said, "Do you want to see a UFO?" I grew up on a farm in northern Maryland, a very rural area. And, what 8-year-old kid's going to say no to that? So took me out and I saw a UFO. I watched it I was the youngest of 6. I was out there with one of my brothers and my sister and my mom. And at some point they decided to go inside. They were bored and I wanted to stay out. So I stayed outside. It wasn't a big deal on the farm. I often spent a lot of time by myself outside at night. I had a dog that was very protective. Stayed right by my side all the time. But I remember watching that UFO, and then I don't know how I got inside. My next memory is of watching the UFO from a window inside the house, and I don't know what happened in that in between time there. So that was a little bit of strangeness. But curiously, I really wasn't that much into UFOs when I was a kid. It was all Bigfoot and ghosts for me. Those were the big things. But even though I saw the UFO, I wasn't that into them. It looked very physical. It was on the horizon above the trees across from our farm. I was standing in the driveway of the farm looking at it, and it looked to be very much like a typical disc. It had lights that seemed to rotate around it, or else they were flashing on and off. I'm not sure, but they appeared to move around the center of it, and it was just hovering there for what seemed like, I don't know, an hour or more. A long time. I don't know. I did have, I have later in life, I kind of put it in quotes, quote unquote, abduction experiences. I don't think I ever left my bed. I don't think that's exactly what happens. I think something weirder than that happens. But, I had these very typical kind of abduction experiences with the Greys and so forth later in life, which does make me look back and wonder, like, at that missing time, like, did something happen there? Yeah, but I can't say. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's harder and harder as we go on to kind of stay in that materialist zone. We're just, the Greys are aliens, or rather little scientists from outer space, and Bigfoot is a creature that we're going to put in a cage someday. I mean, it's just, as time goes on, it's just harder to stay in that zone. At least for me, it is. Yeah, not until the like I said, I'm going to say abduction, but please, I want the listeners to understand I'm using it as a shorthand term. I don't think I was never on a UFO or anything, but just as a shorthand term, the abduction stuff started for me in college, so quite a bit later. As far as I know. And I didn't really have a lot happen when I was a kid. There was kids in the neighborhood said that they would see this large black panther, which is an anomalous thing. We shouldn't have. I don't think there are melanistic mountain lions from what I've read. So if you're seeing a big black panther, you're seeing something that shouldn't be there. And reported seeing it a lot, and I never got to see that. I remember we would play hide and seek at night, and I remember them, running, screaming from the woods, saying, "Black Panther, Black Panther." They saw it. Some of them swore they saw it multiple times, but I never got to see that. I spent all of my time in the woods. It was just me and my dog. and never had anything weird happen when I was a kid. Now, as an adult, and I have these strange things happen with, not, I wouldn't say frequently, but often enough where it gives me pause. I actually look back to when I was a kid and just literally spent all my time in the woods alone, and think back and like, wow, I guess the luck was smiling on me, or else there was nothing happening in the woods there. I grew up on a dark, hollow road, so you think it would have been plenty haunted, but no, not until later in life did the weird stuff really start happening, as far as I can remember. Like I said, when I was in college, so I was renting a room in the basement of my girlfriend's mother's house. This was in a suburb of Baltimore. So this is in a town. And I'm staying in the basement, and I started waking up at night and hearing what I thought was people walking around the outside of the house. And like I said, this is in a suburb, so there could have been people outside. So I mentioned to my girlfriend's mother and the people who lived upstairs, said, "Hey, I think there's people outside at night. Just kind of like maybe lock your doors, and your cars and stuff. I think there's." And they were like, I haven't heard anybody. And I said, well, I keep hearing them at night. And then I started waking up and thinking things were in the room with me. People were in the room with me. And I thought I attributed that to the people that I thought were outside. I thought, there's people outside talking at the windows. They're keeping me, up. They're getting into my dreams. And then, I'm thinking they're in the room with me or something. So I moved my bed to an interior room, no windows. And then it kept happening. I'd wake up and I think people were there. And this culminated in an experience where I woke up one night and there were 3 little doctors standing by my bed. And by what I mean little doctors, I mean short, about 4 feet tall, maybe, and dressed in like surgical gear. They had surgical masks and the like doctors, the little hats they wear in surgery and stuff, that they looked like they were in 1920s or 1930s surgical outfits. So everything was cloth, like cloth masks, and they had it like button down the side of the shirt kind of thing. But that's what they appeared to be to me at that time. And I struggled. I could see them there. I was kind of mostly on my back, but kind of turned partially on my side. I remember they seemed to be doing something to me. I don't know what that was. And I was very angry. I was very upset, and tried to protest in my head and say, it's like basically I'm screaming in my head something along the lines of, you can't do this, or you don't have the right. And I'm very careful when I say that, because I have read other people's accounts, and I know that was in somebody else's account. And so I don't remember specifically my protestation, exactly what I was, kind of saying, but I got what, not mind speak, but what felt very much like a mental brush off from them. Just like, we don't care. Like, I didn't hear those words, but it was just like this, it doesn't matter to us. Like, this is you don't matter. And I kept falling asleep, and I'd wake up and they'd still be there, and I'd fall asleep and they'd wake up. And I remember thinking, like, I am so mad. I'm so angry. Why do I keep falling asleep? Like, this seems impossible. Like, why am I drifting off? Even to the point where I thought, like, they must have anesthesia or something. They keep knocking me out. Woke up screaming and throwing a punch in that direction. I was so angry, screamed at the top of my lungs, and of course nothing was there. And it was very early morning at that point. I kind of gathered myself and just, waited until the people upstairs were awake for the day. And I could hear them up there. And I went upstairs very sheepishly, and I apologized. I said, I'm very sorry. And they said, for what? I said, I screamed at the top of my lungs. There was 5 people that lived up there. Not one of them heard me. Not one of them heard me. And when I need to be loud, I can be loud. And that was weird to me. I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I thought, wow, that was just a bad dream. Well, while this is happening, Whitley Strieber had published Communion, the book that he did on abductions. And I'm seeing this in bookstores. I'm seeing the cover, which has at least the cover back in the late 80s, early 90s had a gray alien on the cover. And I didn't know what it was about. I had no clue what it was about. I just saw it on the bookshelf, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I don't want anything to do with that. I was completely repulsed by it, very upset by it. I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. Some months later, I'm watching a evening news program. I don't know if it was 2020 or 48 Hours, one of the network TV, evening news programs, and they were doing a thing on alien abductions. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to watch it. They're talking about this. And during this program, and I don't remember whether it was drawings or reenactments, they either had people who had drawings of grays or reenactments of what happened to them. Whatever it was, as soon as I saw it, I knew. I was like, oh, those weren't little doctors standing by me. It's like the illusion dropped. And I guess later on I learned this is called a screen memory. And I could see them. And now I know, like when I think of that memory now, I don't remember doctors. I see 3 grays very clearly, very specifically standing there. So that was that. And that kind of continued for the next few years, but I didn't embrace it at all. I really didn't want anything to do with it. At some point after college, I moved back to the farm for a while, and I was interested in it enough to where I got a voice activated cassette recorder, and I put it under my bed. And I thought, I'm going to record myself at night and see what happens here. And I let it go for about a week, and then I played it back, and I'm listening to it. And what I heard was so disturbing. As a podcast guy now, I really wish I had this tape, but I wasn't in the mind space for it, I guess, at the time. It sounded like a series of like 8-bit beeps, like an old Atari game. It's just like beep, 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 boop, 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 just a bunch of that. And then me like saying no over and over again, very passionately, just saying no, no. It disturbed me so much that I took the tape out of the recorder. I think I even pulled the tape out of the cassette, threw it away. I was just not ready for that in my life at that point, and really just avoided it for a long time. Didn't think much of it. That stuff kind of came and went, and I still will have occasional, visits from them. Sometimes they get very, very strange. But I have a difficult relationship with. I don't like that stuff very much at all. I'd much rather go out in the woods and look for Bigfoot, and I've had some scary experiences with that. But I'd much rather deal with that than these little gray things, whatever they are. Yeah, it was. It led me for a while down a lot of rabbit holes with like UFO conspiracies and stuff like that. But it's just, I just didn't stick with it. I felt like the more I got into that, the more I was likely to draw those things in at the time. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I've had 2 instances like that. Once I was working at, my dad had a small business at that farm. I wasn't living there at the time, but we would start our work there every morning. My brother and I were working for my father. And one morning I was driving and I saw a mountain lion. Now, this wasn't black. This was just a normal, natural looking mountain lion. It was in a field at 10 in the morning. I was on the way to a job and I saw it. Wow, I've never seen a mountain lion in Maryland before. This is amazing. Like, wow, isn't that cool? And I remember I got home and I told my brother and my father, like, I saw a mountain lion in this field and blah, blah, blah. And the next day, now my brother was a hunter. He was outside, as much as I am, probably for different reasons, but he should have been interested in this. The next day, the same time of the morning, in the same field, we're driving by, and he was driving this time. The first day I was alone when I saw it. This time I was with him, and there's a mountain lion in the field walking. It was in the same exact place at the same exact time of day. And I said, look at that. Look, there it is. There's that mountain lion. And he drove by. He's like, he was hypnotized. He just goes, uh-huh. And I was like, no, look, a mountain lion right there. Uh-huh. And just kept driving like he was hypnotized. And I remember thinking, like, why didn't he care about that? Years later, I was with someone else. We had done a drywall job, and we were getting home really late. It was like 4 a.m, and we're driving through rural Pennsylvania, and I look over to the right, and this field is lit up. Just the whole field is lit up. You can't see any source of light. It looks like there was like stadium lights on it. It was that bright, completely lit up. And I said to the guy who was driving, I said, "Look at that! Look, look, look!" And he did the same thing. He was just like, and kept on driving. I'm like, "No, look at that light! Like, let's go check that out." And just kept driving. And I thought, wow, it's not for them. It's not for them. Yeah. There's certain places we go where there's one place that we call Site 7. Just we gave it a code name. There's no reason. We don't have sites 1 through 6. It's just a name we came up with. Just a code name. That we see weird lights there regularly. We've seen other stuff there, but the main thing we see there over and over again is unexplained lights, just orbs in the woods and stuff. And most of the time, it's pretty dependable. I can take people there. I've taken skeptics there who said, "I'll tell you what those lights are." So, all right, come on. And they ended up at the end of the night going, "I don't know what those lights are," So pretty dependably, but sometimes you can't guarantee anything. You know what I mean? So sometimes you take people there and nothing happens. And I've taken people there that was super into the paranormal. Like, I got to go see Site 7. Okay. And then I take them there and it's just nothing's there. It's like, there's nothing you can do about it. So, let me go ahead and say that I've never seen for sure a big hairy thing in the woods. I've seen once I saw a big thing in the woods, but it was so fast and it moved in such a way that I'll just tell the story. So there's a place here that I've written about. I've written 2 books about it, and eventually I'll probably write more about it because it's a very, very interesting place called Toad Road. And if you look up the legends on it, there's a bunch of nonsense on the internet about an insane asylum there that burnt down and stuff. And that's just not true. There was never an insane asylum there. I get into that, the true history of it in my books. But that said, weird stuff does still happen there. A lot of people have had strange encounters out there. Most of it sounds like cryptid stuff, screams in the woods. There's an account of a guy in 1974 who got attacked by a hairy monster, what he called a hairy monster out there. I tracked him down. While I was talking, I asked him, I said, "Do you think it could have been Bigfoot?" And he got really quiet. He's like, "I never even thought about it like that." He's like, "I just thought it was a monster. That's all I thought it was, a monster." He's like, "Yeah, he could have been." But in any case, a lot of other like strange encounters in this area. Well, I was out there one day with a friend, and we had hiked most of the road. It's an old closed road. There's no longer a road. It was a towpath along a creek here in York County, Pennsylvania. That's how it got the name. It was a tow road, and it became Toad Road, just whispering down the lane over time. They call it Toad Road. So we were hiking there one day, and we had gone, maybe half, 3/4 away of the road. I like to hike the whole thing end to end. I don't know why. I'm just like that. I like to do the whole thing. So we didn't do the whole thing that day. We turned around. He wanted to go for some reason. I don't know if he had an appointment or what. So we turned around, and on the way back out, 2 things happened. One, we hit what people, and I've heard other people describe this on Sasquatch Chronicles and on my show, and so what they call the wall of stench. It was like a foot or 2 feet, maybe 18 inches of stink that you could walk into and walk out of and turn around and walk back into it. And you only smelled it in that wall of stink area. Very strange. So that happened. And then we got beyond that. And as I'm headed on the trail out, I look down and I see a raccoon skull dead in the middle of the trail. Now, it is possible I could have stepped over that, but it's unlikely. I'm an artist and I collect skulls, and my eyes are trained in the woods. Since I was a little kid, I've collected skulls. I've always loved to draw them and stuff. I'm always on those. To have a skull in the middle of the trail that I stepped over on the way in, it seems very, very unlikely to me. So pick the skull up, put it in my bag. So we made plans with my friends to come back. I was like, let's come back and do the rest of it next week. I want to do the whole thing. I feel like it's incomplete. He's like, okay. Next week came, he canceled on me. Following week came, he canceled on me. week after that, I said, you know what? I'm going to do it by myself. No problem. So I go out there. I'm in the place about where I found the raccoon skull, and I hear something up ahead, and I look, and I saw something. And the only thing I can say was big. It was bigger than anything that should be in the woods in York County, Pennsylvania. And it was fast, super fast, and it made no sound. And I was headed south on the trail, and it shot south from me. Just I saw it maybe a second, maybe 2 seconds. The first thought that came to my mind, because I had seen moose in Massachusetts, was that's a moose, because it had this weird gait about it. Not that I didn't see 4 legs. I just saw the back of something go, but it had this weird gait, the way it moved. And then, of course, I'm thinking, well, there's no moose in Pennsylvania. That's absolutely ridiculous. What was that? Again, I'm not going to say Bigfoot, but it was gray and black, and it was big. It's very, very big. Well, without thinking, I wasn't being brave. I just literally didn't have any thought. I took off after this thing fast as I could, and I probably went third of a mile, half of a mile, maybe, I don't know. Following this thing, didn't see it or hear it again. I just took off in the direction that it went, and I was stopped in my path by a skull that was impaled on a branch in the middle of the trail. Let me see if I have it. It's on the cover of my one book. So it was a deer skull that was right in the middle of the path, right at eye level. Now, the only thing I can tell you is 2 weeks before, it wasn't there. Could a person have come down and put that there? Yes, they could have. But it's a private area. No one should be there. A hunting club has access during hunting season. This was in the spring. Nobody should have been down there. It's a very nasty trail. It's not a fun place to go hike. You will sink in the mud. There's stinging nettles, and I came out. I must have picked 5 ticks off myself that day. I saw a copperhead that day. It's not a fun place to hike. It's not some place that people are going to just hang out and do a pleasure hike. So could have been a person who put it there, but I really didn't get that impression. And a lot of people said, "Oh, do you think the skull was a warning?" For whatever impressions are worth, no. When I took that skull home, that was my skull. I put it in my pack. The feeling I got was, oh, you like that little raccoon skull? Here, I'm going to give you something you're really going to like. And here was this deer skull. Now that started a series of events that went on for a couple years, where I found skulls on, I'm going to say 75%, but it was probably more like 80 or 90% of every paranormal investigation I went on. I would find a skull as if it was left there, like sitting there waiting for me. Giving an example, I went on one. This guy called me up and told me he had Bigfoot on his property. He had just seen him the day before. I said, I'll be there today. Thankfully, my job allows me to do that, to drop whatever and get right out and see these witnesses. Went up and saw him. I remember the guy that he had seen 2 creatures on the other side of a pond on his property. He wouldn't even go over on the other side of the pond. It was daylight. And he's like, I'm not going over there. I'm like, all right, I'll go over there. And I was doing the thing. I had my walking stick, and I said, like, I'm going to raise up my stick. You tell me how tall they were. You tell me to stop where they were standing. So I go around the other side, stop. They were right there. I was like, okay, I'm going to raise up my stick. He tells me that they're about 9 feet tall. But after he's done all that, I look down at my feet, and there's a deer skull just sitting right there, right where he said the creatures were. And then it would happen again and again and again on these investigations. I would just find skulls. Like I said, I was collecting my entire life, and I found more in that short period of time, that short year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was, than I had found in my entire life previously. I had so many that we have what we call inside and outside skulls now. There's just too many. There's too many to keep them all. There's crazy amount of skulls I found. Yeah, it really felt that way. And people were with me. And even one investigation we went on, it was pretty funny. It was this is more of a ghost thing. It's like we were chasing down an old legend. We were just doing a show for Strange Familiars for the podcast. It was this old legend of this guy from Maryland who would, he owned an iron furnace back in the 1700s, early 1700s era. And he would dress up himself, they said, as a ghost and scare his neighbors and stuff. And when we were on that investigation in the woods behind where he lived, we're just kind of hiking through the woods. I found a plastic Halloween skull. This is no time around Halloween, just sitting in the woods in this very, very specific place where we were going. We could get up behind his house and actually look at his house. And one of my listeners pointed out, they said, "Isn't it funny that this guy used to dress up as a ghost, as a pretend ghost, and you find a fake skull on that investigation?" I was like, "Yeah, still found a skull, but that time it was a fake one." Very interesting. But yeah, most of them were real skulls. They were deer skulls, raccoon skulls, fox skulls, and they would seem as if they were just left there for me. They were out in the open. These weren't things I was digging under bushes for or anything. They were just laying there, right there for me. It's amazing. More now than before. There was a streak there where I was getting, like the year before the pandemic, I remember was great for Bigfoot. I was getting sometimes 2 and 3 Bigfoot calls a month, which is huge for where I am in Pennsylvania. That's a lot. And going to talk to people left and right and everything. But that kind of trailed off a bit. It still get some here and there, but it's definitely not as many as I was before. And now we're getting, more of the paranormal stories from people, ghosts and stuff like that. Yeah. So probably about 50-50 at this point. Yeah. We started looking into this area in Gettysburg. We're very lucky that I'm very close to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which is the ghost capital of Pennsylvania. They like to say they're the most haunted place in the world. I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who would argue that, but
I want to go there so bad.
Wonderful place for ghost hunting and paranormal in general, if you're interested in that. But I started going to this place that the locals call Suicide Bridge. It's Eisenhower Bridge is the true name for the place. And I had first heard about this. I was at a paranormal conference in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which isn't very close to Gettysburg, but I was kind of overheard some ghost hunters saying "Oh, the scariest place in Gettysburg is Suicide Bridge." And I kind of filed that away. I'll go there someday. And I went there once, and it's kind of I was kind of being flippant. It's kind of because I'd done some research, and to my knowledge, no suicides have happened on that bridge. It's just a urban legend. So I was kind of making fun of it because what I had thought at the time was that they were saying people had jumped off of this bridge to commit suicide. And I was jokingly calling it Broken Ankle Bridge because you really wouldn't kill yourself unless you jumped head first maybe and hit a rock. But it's certainly, just jumping off, you're probably not going to kill yourself. You hurt yourself maybe. But so I was calling it Broken Ankle Bridge and sort of saying, this nonsense. Nobody killed themselves here. The legend is actually that someone hanged themselves from the bridge, not that they jumped off the bridge. But that also, as far as I know, is just a legend. It's not true. But when I was there the first time, I had one of my friends with me, a couple of my friends. It was Adam from the Paranormal podcast was up from Tennessee, and a fellow I used to do Strange Familiars with was with me as well. And as we were leaving, he needed to relieve himself, and me, just being a jerk, pretended to drive away and leave him there. He went off in the brush, kind of, and I just drove about 100 yards up the way and turned around, And he came out, and he was mad at me. He was very upset, and he said, as he was relieving himself, he said the trees and everything started shaking all around him. I was like, whoa. Wow. But again, just, didn't know what to make of that. And didn't go back for some time, a couple years, I think. And I was hiking in Gettysburg with my research partner, Chad, and it got, at a certain point, you have to get off the battlefield at Gettysburg. At the time, I think it was 10 p.m. I think now it's earlier than that. I think now you have to get off at dark. But he was like, let's, he wasn't done for the night. He's like, let's go somewhere else. And I was like, well, we're here in Gettysburg. Let's go check out this Suicide Bridge again. And I started telling him the legends I heard. And we got there, and this time it was completely different from the start. We heard bangs and knocks, and there was a cold spot on the other side of the bridge, and there were people there that we were interviewing, and they were telling us like all these crazy stories of experiences they had there. And I was like, okay, so this is something different. So we came back time after that, and it was super active. Just knocks. The bridge would knock. You hear knocks in the woods beside the bridge. You hear knocks under the bridge on the wooden of the bridge, and you hear knocks on the metal. It's an iron bridge. You hear knocks on the metal. It was crazy. I've never been any place that active. The cold spot on the other side of the bridge, on it's the west side of the bridge, is the coldest cold spot I felt in any. I've been in haunted houses and stuff and felt these colds, but this was like frigid. And this is the summer when we were there. It was like walking into an ice box. It was unbelievable. And my friend kept saying he felt drained, and the next day he said he was sick. And then this is during COVID. I was like, oh man, I hope you didn't get COVID. And he's like, no, I don't think it's that. He's like, I just feel drained. And it wasn't COVID. He just, every time we go, then we come home the next day, he just felt drained, just felt tired and drained. I would get a little bit of that, but nowhere near as much as him. He was affected way more than me. So that was a really interesting place. We saw weird lights there. We did a spirit box session there using what they call the Estes method. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So it's, kind of put some separation. You're not just taking what comes out of the spirit box and go with that. He's blindfolded and has earphones on, listening to the spirit box. I'm asking the questions. I can't hear the spirit box. He can't hear the questions. So if you get relevant answers, well, you don't know, but I think you're really getting something. And sometimes we do it and it's nonsense, but we did it here and we got what I felt was very, very relevant answers. That said, one of the questions I asked is, when will we see you, whatever this entity is? And it said next time. And the next time we were there, I didn't see it. I was looking the other way. We were interviewing 2 witnesses, but the 2 witnesses and my partner saw a 7-foot black shadow cross the path. So they've seen figures there. There's a little bit of woods by the bridge, and we've had things pace us. You can hear it right beside you, pace us through the woods. You hear things hit the bank. Sounds like something slapping the bank or slapping the mud by the creek often, and you turn your light. There's nothing there. There's no beavers. I know beavers slap their tail. This isn't it. There's no beavers in this creek. So a lot of strange stuff and anomalous lights. We seem to get a lot of anomalous lights no matter where we go. So that's been our kind of most recent obsession as far as more ghost-like or poltergeist-like activity. Well, one of the witnesses described what they saw, and they said they saw this big thing. As they said, it was wider than me and my research partner standing next to each other and taller than us, and had arms that hung down to its knees. And if that's a ghost, I don't know what kind of ghost that is. They saw it cross the bridge and go over to the other side. So there's so much crossover in these fields. For me, it's hard to separate them anymore. Ghost, UFOs, Sasquatch. I don't know that they're the same thing, but they certainly express themselves in very similar ways. You get weird lights with all 3. You get this poltergeist activity, knocks and weird smells and all that with all 3. So I have a difficult time separating them anymore. And likewise, I've kind of come to the point where I don't think of Bigfoot as a monkey that we can put in a cage or an ape. So some people correct me and say, so they're not monkeys. They're hominids, or they're great ape. Okay, I know. I'm using that as a shorthand term. I don't think it's a natural animal that we can put in a cage. Let's put it that way. So it's a lot easier for me to think maybe there is Bigfoot activity happening around the Gettysburg battlefield, even though there's not a ton of wilderness there. But we've definitely gotten some reports besides that one. Some other people have told us they've either seen or run into very Bigfoot-like things, wood knocks and screams and stuff. Yeah, so the subtitle is High Strangeness and the Bigfoot Phenomenon. So it looks at the weird aspects of Bigfoot that a lot of the flesh and blood researchers don't really want to touch. And I'm talking about its association with mystery lights and UFOs and orbs, how how it behaves sometimes like a ghost, disappears, phases out, disappears and reappears. Footprints stop, a whole trackway of footprints will just stop and go nowhere. How it's connected folklorically to these other creatures throughout the world, goblins, fairies, et cetera, et cetera. We look into aspects of it that are strange, like missing evidence, how much evidence seems to go missing, an unusual amount of evidence just kind of disappears with this stuff. So it looks at all the weird aspects of the Bigfoot phenomenon. We don't have any solutions because no one does. And anybody who tells you they have the answers is lying to you because, or they need to provide their records because nobody really knows. But we do look at it and we can say, hey, look, let's take glowing red eyes, for example. A lot of these things are reported having glowing red or green or, glowing eyes one for another. And people are very specific that they're not eye shine. It's not reflection. It's eye glow. It's self-illuminating eyes. And you can't find an animal anywhere in the world that has self-illuminating eyes. You can look for it. You can't find it. They just don't exist. But what you can find, if you go back through folklore, are accounts of things like fairies and trolls and elves and vampires and werewolves, et cetera, having glowing eyes. So these are the kind of things we look at and we point to, like, hey, our ancestors were talking about this stuff. They didn't call it Bigfoot. They would have called it something else, either a fairy or a troll. And I know when I say fairy, people think, well, they're little things with wings. No, not originally. The fairies could manifest big, small, anywhere in between. They were usually ugly. They didn't look like Tinkerbell. So, our ancestors, depending on what culture they came from, might have called that a fairy. And they talked about it. And the things they're describing, the way these things acted, are very similar to what modern day reports of Bigfoot are, down to things like very unusual details, like walking on the roof. We get tons of Bigfoot reports of them climbing up on the roofs. Strange enough, a lot of these folkloric creatures, they'll talk about them climbing on the roof and stomping around on the roof. Very, very, to me, it's super interesting. I mean, I find this thing incredibly interesting, the comparative folklore aspect of it. So, like I said, we get into, all the weirder aspects of Bigfoot. It ended up being 2 volumes, 2 thick volumes. They're not small books. They're very thick volumes because there was so much to cover. There was no shortage of it. When I first got into Bigfoot, I remember the Flesh and Blood guys saying to me, oh, this weird stuff happens around Bigfoot, but it's very rare. It rarely ever happens. Not true. Not true at all. It happens frequently, with great frequency. Very, very strange things happen around this creature all the time. And if you get someone who's a hunter maybe, and just saw one walk by his tree stand in the woods, or someone was driving and they saw it cross the road in front of their car, they're very sure it's just a natural animal. And they'll tell you, it was just a natural creature. That's all it was. It's just an animal. There's nothing paranormal about it. But if you talk to people who have them on their property, who have repeat encounters with them, or who get into like gifting exchanges with them, you will start finding these strange stories come up. There's something very strange about these things, and that I'll not back away from. I don't think anyone's ever going to put one in a cage, but even if they do, they still have to explain all these strange things that go along with the creature, these UFO sightings and the trackways that just stop, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what those 2 books do. I'm very, very proud of those books. I got the idea because I knew that book needed to be written, and I knew it was a huge undertaking, and I knew I wasn't going to finish it. If I worked on it myself, it was going to be a long, long time before I finished it. And honestly, I was afraid somebody else was going to beat me to the punch, because it was a book that should have been written 20 years ago or more. But I asked my friend Joshua Cutchin, he's another author. I said, hey, will you help me with this? And he loved the idea, and he jumped on, and we tackled it, the 2 of us, and it ended up being a wonderful project for us both to work on. Very, very proud of those books. But those were, my first book was called Beyond the Seventh Gate. That was about that area, Toad Road, I was talking about. My second book was called Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, and that was a collection of historical newspaper articles that talk about what I believe is Bigfoot. They called them wild men or gorillas back then. They didn't call them Bigfoot. This is from the early 1800s through the 1920s. So I collected a bunch of articles for that. After that, I did West Coast Wild Men, which collected similar reports from the newspaper from Oregon, Washington State, and California. And then I came back to Toad Road, did a book called Don't Look Behind You, because I got more witnesses came forward and talked to me, and I found more information. So that was my kind of follow-up book to the first one. Then the 2 volumes of Where the Footprints End. Then I did a book of my illustrations, just called Illustrations of the Other. It's called Apparitions, rather. Illustrations of the Other. That's just a collection of my favorite illustrations to do with the paranormal. And then my most recent book is called The Witch Cloud, and that's about those haunted bridges in Gettysburg. My first book, I didn't write about my own experiences at all, and I was afraid, like, if I write about my experiences, maybe people won't believe me when I'm talking about other people's experiences or whatever. But I kind of gave that up. I was like, you know what, this stuff happened. I'm going to write about it. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I've wondered if they're not what our ancestors would have called earth wights or earth spirits, that are bound to a particular area. That's kind of why I asked if you felt that Bigfoot that you saw was sort of specific to that area. Because I've often wondered if they're not spirits of place, what they are, what they call them, genus loci, that are specific to certain areas. Interestingly enough, in doing research for Where the Footprints End, we found a number of accounts of people seeing Bigfoot in the middle of the city, but in a park, but in the middle of cities, in towns, in the town park, in these places that aren't, 300 miles of untapped wilderness, so it does happen. I mean, it seems like they need some kind of woods to manifest, but I don't think they need, acres and acres of unbound wilderness. Yeah, a lot of people have similar thoughts about them. There's some researchers that even think that they're somehow in trees, which is a very, very interesting concept. I've heard people say that the trees somehow manifest them as, for some reason. My only question as regards to that is so many accounts have them like just breaking the crud out of trees, snapping limbs off and doing this. They aren't super kind to trees. So that would be my only question about that. I'm not saying it's not true. It's just a question like, why are they doing so much damage to trees? Sure. Thank you for having me. If anyone's interested, they can find all my details at strangefamiliars.com. That's where my podcast is, but all the contact information goes to me there. My podcast drops weekly. And like I said, if you're interested in my books or anything, they're on Amazon, but you can get them from me. And again, all the links, the easiest place to find me is just strangefamiliars.com. That's me. So thanks so much. Thanks for having me.